welcome to another Rules Primer video. Today we're going to be looking at Strike of the Eagle, a two-player block war game designed by Robert Zak and published by Academy Games. This game portrays the Polish-Soviet War of 1920. It's a scenario-driven game. Here I have the board set up for the first scenario, which is kind of a smaller learning scenario. And my intent in this video is to kind of give you a head start on the rules so that you can jump in and playing without too much rules instruction. So first I'm going to go over the components of the game, what they're used for. Then we'll quickly look at the victory conditions, and then we'll go through the turn sequence, look at the various orders that you can give during the game. Okay, so let's get started with the components. Okay, so the game comes with a very nice full-color rules booklet. Pretty short considering it's a war game. And it also comes with two really good player aids that goes over the turn order, turn sequence, and then the order of play and kind of more depth on the other side. It also comes with a scenario booklet that contains a nice historical overview of the conflict, and then several scenarios. These cubes are used when you play a card for reinforcements. You take a number of these cubes, and then at the end of the turn you get to use those cubes to either heal your wounded blocks or bring out new blocks. Game comes with blue blocks for the Polish side and red blocks for the Soviets. Each block has a certain number of squares which denote combat strength, and then when the block takes damage you rotate the block so that the lower number of blocks or squares are shown at the top. The black squares are infantry divisions, and there are some white squares. I can't see any right now. Oh, there you go. White squares denote cavalry. Each side has their own deck of cards, which we'll look at more when we get over here to the Russian side. Has this cardboard turn marker which indicates which phase and which turn you're on, and also it tracks victory points, and it also tracks the initiative on each side, the northern front and the southern front. In the first scenario there's only the southern front. Initiative is interesting in that when you can have, like, say the Polish here have a 2 initiative. When they get knocked down to 1, then if they get knocked down to 0, what you do is flip it over so that the Russians have 1 initiative. It's kind of interesting. Of course, the highlight of the game is this beautiful board. Hopefully the camera will zoom a little bit. But you can see the detail on this board is just fantastic. It has city names, different pictures for each town. Well, not each town, but lots of various pictures, different artwork. And then major cities have their name on a banner, and they also have a victory point number there. Some cities and towns are also fortified, which you see this little fortification icon. Some cities and towns are only fortified from one direction. So in this case, this fortified by this river. But if you were to somehow get to this town and come this way, it's not fortified. Here are the Russian or the Soviet blocks, Soviet deck of cards. Let's look at these cards. The cards are interesting in that you can do lots of different things with them. You can play them at the beginning of the turn for additional orders, which we'll talk about later. You can play them they have historical events on them. They also have a combat modifier, which we'll talk about later. And they also have a reinforcement blocks section so that you could play a card for these reinforcement blocks. Okay, each side is going to have a selection of order tokens, which, as we'll see later, you're going to place on your units on the board, and then flip them over to see the different orders which do different things. We will look at each of these later, but I'll just go over. This is a forced march out. This is a forced march in. This is a fortify. This is a recon order. This is a march out and a march in. This is a reorganize order. This is a withdraw order. And then this is a rail transport order. You also have tokens for out of supply units, and then these tokens are placed according to the scenario instructions, and they denote victory point cities' objectives, basically. Okay, so that's the components of the game. Next, we'll quickly go over the victory conditions before we dig right into the turn order. Okay, the victory conditions of each scenario are specified in the scenario description. Usually that's going to be the player who has the most victory points at the end of a certain round, but some scenarios may have different victory conditions. The game comes with a victory point tracker that actually works the same way as the initiative tracker. So, for example, the scenario will have a starting victory point total. In this case, it's the Soviet 2. And if the Polish side is able to knock them down where it would be 0, what you'd actually do instead of going to 0, since there is no 0, you'd flip it over and it would turn into a Polish 1. So in the first scenario, the player at the end of one round of play who has the high is actually on the victory point tracker, and then they're going to win. So there are two ways to get victory points. The first, simplest way, is to capture key cities on the map. Each city has a little yellow number that shows the victory point amount that city is worth. And I believe some like Kiev are actually worth 2 victory points. The second way to get victory points is to win a great victory, which means you cause 4 strength points worth of real losses to the enemy in one battle. And if you do that, then you get a one victory point bonus. Some scenarios, such as scenario 3, I believe, gives you bonus victory points for specific cities. You can see this, if the Poles capture Kiev, then they can get 4 victory points. So the scenarios might have special rules. You'll need to make sure you read your scenario very well. Make sure there's not special victory point bonuses. So that's the victory conditions. Now let's look at the turn sequence. Okay, a turn of the game consists of 7 phases. First, there's the replenish cards phase. Then there's 5 operation phases. And finally, there's a reinforcement phase. The replenish cards phase is very simple. You basically just draw 6 cards. Each player draws 6 cards. And then if the player has more than 7 cards, they're going to have to discard down to 7. And then you're basically done with the replenish cards phase. Now, it's important to keep in mind that you're going to have only 7 cards at most, usually only 6 cards, and those cards have to last you through all 5 operations phases. So that's kind of where a lot of the difficult decisions come in, as you'll see. Let's look at a typical operation phase now. Each operations phase begins with the players making a difficult choice. That is whether or not to play a card. Now you can play a card at this point, for one of 3 things. Now you have to choose one. You can use this blue number to give you extra orders. So typically for each front you're only going to have 2 orders. You're going to be able to place 2 orders, and one of those orders has to be the recon, which is sort of like almost like a decoy order. So really, on a typical turn, you're not going to be able to do a lot unless you spend a card to give you extra orders. So in this case, if I played this card for the orders, I would be able to place 5 orders, one of which had to be the recon order. The other option is to play the card as the historical event. These historical events can be some pretty powerful stuff and can have various effects on the game, and you'll want to keep that in mind when you're looking at the cards. And the last thing is you can play them for the reinforcement blocks. So in this case, I would get 3 blocks that I would take from the supply and place in front of me, and then during the reinforcement phase, I would be able to use those cubes to heal blocks or to get new blocks. Now in the first scenario, we're only playing 1 round, so we're not even going to have a reinforcements phase. So when you're playing the first scenario, you're not going to want to play a card for the reinforcement cubes, but that's something you'll want to keep in mind in later scenarios that do use the reinforcement rules. So just to recap, each player is going to pick one card, and they're going to either play it for the extra orders or the historical events. So the way that works is that each player is going to pick a card, put it down in front of them, and then when both of them are ready, turn over the card and reveal their choice. Then after that's done, the player with the initiative on the initiative track is going to decide who gets to or who has to play or place the first order. And so we're going to take our order markers and we're going to place them on the board, alternating between players, starting with the player with initiative chooses to go first. So usually the player with initiative is going to choose his opponent, and so that person is going to place an order face down somewhere on the map. Might be on their own, might be on an empty location, might be on an opponent's block. And that's going to depend on what the actual order is. But so the Russian player put one, the Polish player placed one, and so on until all the orders for both sides have been placed on the board. Then we're going to go through and we're going to, see, that was not a good place to place that. We're going to turn all the orders face up simultaneously. And then we're going to follow the sequence to resolve those orders. Orders are resolved in a specific order, which is helpfully summarized on the summary sheet. And it starts with the forced march orders. So this, an example, this is a forced march out order, and that allows the one or all of the blocks that received that order to move either 1 or 2 spaces if they're infantry, or 1 to 3 spaces if they're cavalry, to any place within their range. So you can send some to this way and some this way, for example. Forced march in is another is a similar, but it allows any blocks within range to move to that location. So again, infantry can move an extra move, so they can move 2 spaces, and cavalry can move an extra space as well. Now you may be thinking, wow, forced marches are great, why don't you use them all the time? They give you a bonus move. Well, it's because blocks that have a forced move order fight at half strength on that round. So you probably are not going to want to forced march into the enemy territory, because you're going to be you're only going to be half as efficient in combat. After that, you're going to execute any recon orders. A recon order basically forces you to show the opponent what blocks are in that area. Recon orders are also kind of like decoy orders to make an opponent think you're going to attack at a certain spot when you're actually, just reconning them and you're attacking in a different spot. After recon orders, you're going to execute move orders. Move orders are the same as forced march orders, only infantry can only move 1, cavalry can only move 1 or 2, and but the blocks are going to fight at full strength. After that, you're going to execute withdraw orders, which allow blocks to move out of an area if they're being attacked by the enemy. And finally, you're going to resolve battle. So resolving a battle it happens if there are blocks of both sides in one location. You're going to reveal the blocks. In this case, you've got 3 strength worth of cavalry and 2 strength worth of infantry. Now the next step in resolving a battle is that each player is going to play a battle event card if they want to, and then each player must play a card to modify their combat value. So you have 2 options. You can play a card from your hand to modify the combat value, such as this one, and you're actually going to get a +1 to that, sorry. So in this case, you'd have a +4 if you play one from your hand. The other alternative is to draw the top card of your deck, but you don't get the bonus for that. So in this case, it'd be a +1. So you're going to total that up. You're going to consult this combat value chart, and then that determines how many strength points of losses that the enemy must endure. And then Then you're going to retreat and advance blocks accordingly. And you're done with resolving battles. Next, you're going to reveal reorganization orders, which allows a block to gain 1 strength point. So there's a couple of restrictions. Only 1 block in an area is going to be able to get this order, and if you're attacked, if that block is attacked, you have to reveal the order, and that unit fights at half strength. So you're probably going to only want to do this in kind of units that are behind the lines, but then that would allow the unit to gain 1 strength point. Also, a unit that gets played that gets the reorganization order cannot have moved on the same turn. Okay, next and finally, you're going to execute any rail transport orders. Rail transport allows up to 4 blocks to move up to 8 areas as long as the areas are all connected by railways. So that's a way to get some of these rear blocks to the front quickly by sending them via rail transport. Okay, so after executing all the rail transport orders, you're going to check supply. Supply basically means that all of your infantry blocks need to be within 3 areas of a controlled key city without any enemy blocks, cutting them off. And it needs to be within 5 areas of cavalry units have to be within 5 areas of a controlled key city. Now, if the units are not within supply, then they get marked with a out of supply marker, and they can only play move out, withdraw, or defend area orders. So after you check supply, you're going to check the victory points, and then you're going to move on to the reinforcements phase. There's several things that I did not mention. For one thing, leaders, also reinforcements, stuff that is not covered in the first scenario. So you're going to definitely want to check the rule book and read over those if you're going to play a more advanced scenario. But I'm hoping that this information will be enough to kind of get you started on the first scenario and give you a head start on the rules. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the gaming. Thanks.